I guess the horn doesn't work. Well, it's never a good sign to see a wire completely disconnected, and I just glued it back on, and I'm really hoping that that is able to solve my problem.
So here's the deal. We tried cleaning the immobilizer first with the hopes of trying to put it back in the car so we can move past all the electrical issues and avoid paying $1,200 for a new one. Since Porsche Boxsters have immobilizers under the driver's seat, if there's any sort of leak, all that water ends up being collected directly to where the immobilizer is, and that's why you see water damage being so common in Boxsters. Even after cleaning the circuit board, the corrosion ate away at the circuit board itself, and you may be asking yourself, well, it doesn't look ugly anymore, so why doesn't it work? To understand that, you have to know a little bit about printed circuit boards, or PCBs. A circuit and a PCB are related, but essentially they're different concepts. A circuit refers to the path of an electrical current, while a PCB is a physical board that holds and connects electronic components to form a circuit. It's a physical implementation of the circuit that provides a platform to mount and connect the components. A circuit can be formed by connecting electronic components, such as resistors, capacitors, transistors, in a specific pattern to allow the flow of electrical current. The circuit can be designed and implemented on a PCB, which provides a platform to mount and connect the electronic components. At its simplest form, you can think of our PCB board as an island, and the electrical components that form the circuit as some buildings and tourist attractions, I don't know, all that fun stuff. But then imagine there's a tsunami that takes down the entire town and the city is crumbled. And let's say Tyler cleaning the board was damage control, and he cleans up the city. But no matter how much he cleaned the city, the island still experienced a tsunami. And to experience the fun of another thriving island city, you would need to either 1, build the city from the ground up, or 2, go to a new one. And we don't know anything about circuit boards, so we're getting a new one. A few days after we posted our last video, the radio system we bought in the first episode was delivered. So with having the new radio and a clean immobilizer, Tyler decided to risk catching our house on fire and put the immobilizer back in the car and turn it on. He was able to get the radio and dashboard working, but not the engine. So this meant that cleaning the immobilizer didn't work. So we then had to find a company to send the immobilizer to get a replacement, which means we have no other choice but to cough up $1,200. Since we hit that massive roadblock, we resorted to our old ways and ended up hitting pause on this project, in which we let the car sit out in the open, which is literally how we got here in the first place. We live in the Texas area, and within the past year, we have had a plethora of storms, hail, and just overall toxic weather. Luckily, our neighbor had a spare Porsche cover from an old 911 he used to own, but it has blown off multiple times. But now, if we don't get the immobilizer working, we won't be able to start working on any of the mechanical issues. I bet you're sick of us talking about this immobilizer. You want more problems. You want different problems. And don't you worry, there are plenty to go around.
This is a really weird way of doing this, but it's a Torx 30 because Germans. But I don't have anything with enough leverage or handle to actually turn a screw. So I'm using a Torx bit for an impact driver and then gripping it with a wrench.
Look, I know it's kinda janky, but it works. Here, I'm slowly taking apart the steering wheel. And you might be wondering, hey, why are you taking apart the steering wheel? In the last video, you were trying to fix the immobilizer. And to that, I say, hold your horses. We'll get to the immobilizer eventually, when I'm emotionally stable enough to talk about it. Imagine you're out on a leisurely drive. You're coming up on an intersection. You downshift and put on your blinker. You take the turn just like every turn you've ever taken. You're having a really good time, until suddenly, as you straighten out the steering wheel, the blinker resets. But it doesn't sound like it usually does. Instead of the typical little pop, it's a violent sound of plastic snapping. And for months after that, before the car became undrivable, the blinker had to be manually reset on every turn. So today, we're fixing that. The way a blinker works is that there's this little piece of metal inside that acts as a spring. When you set the blinker to left or right, it places that spring under load. When the steering wheel goes back to center, it hits a little piece of plastic that unlocks the spring, which resets the blinker. That spring is held in place by a plastic casing that kind of surrounds it. And when plastic gets warmed and cooled over the course of a couple decades in the elements, it gets really brittle. Eventually, the force of the loaded spring is greater than the force that the plastic can withstand. Thus, blinker no work. And so I figured while we're taking apart everything anyways, I might as well fix all the little things that will make this car fun to drive again, if we can ever get it to start. And that's why I'm wrestling with the steering wheel, trying to take it apart and get it off of the car.
Oh. So one of the wires in the steering wheel is broken? I don't know what that one does, but airbag maybe? Yikes. No, not airbag. Horn maybe? Maybe the horn didn't work? I don't know, though. This looks like some sort of ground. I'll check the manual. It might be the horn. Yeah, it's the horn. It's not the airbag. But I guess the horn doesn't work. Well, it's never a good sign to see a wire completely disconnected. I guess we're just gonna have to resolder it. Yikes. I didn't really explain why I'm doing this, but the blinker on this car, the spring, I don't know if you can see that, the spring is broken, so it doesn't hold, and then if you go down, it doesn't retract, it just stays all the time. And this is apparently a common problem in these cars, but what happened is one time I was turning the wheel and reset the blinker, and it just snapped the spring. So I'm hoping I don't have to buy a whole new assembly, and I can just buy a little spring, or just adjust it or something. I have no idea what this is going to look like on the inside, so we'll see. I know this is overkill, but it's easier. I have so many things coming out of this car right now, so I'm trying to keep track of all the screws and bolts by writing down where they're from on this workbench and then just putting them on top. Hopefully that makes my life easier later.
So after taking the main part of the steering wheel off, it was time to get to all of the stocks. Here I'm trying to figure out which part of the blinker is actually broken and where that spring is that holds it in place. I am by no means an auto mechanic, so I really have no clue what I'm doing here. I'm kinda just taking screws out and consulting YouTube videos and the owner's manual and just hoping that I can eventually find what I need to fix it.
I see the spring, and it looks like it's just turned a little, so hopefully it's not too bad. I'm making sure to mark everywhere on the steering wheel with a Sharpie, that way when I put it back on, it's the same.
And by the same, I mean, I don't want the steering wheel to be crooked when I put it back on, because I need the steering wheel to align with the wheels of the car. That way straight is actually straight, not like a little left or a little right. By putting a little line with Sharpie on both parts of the steering wheel, I can just line that up later and not have to worry about lining the steering wheel up properly. It'll just be done. Here you can see I'm just making sure everything is disconnected from all the screws to the wiring harnesses that allow the blinkers to actually do something in the car. So once all of that is disconnected from the car, I can just take the whole steering wheel column and all the stocks that come with it off the car and bring it to the workbench. It'll just be a lot easier to work on over there. Before I fully take anything apart, I like to just try and analyze it. That way I can decide, how is it held together? Am I going to permanently break something if I start taking this apart? And what do I actually need to remove to make this work? Now, this whole part is meant to be a permanent fixture that shouldn't really break, but it did, so we have to take it apart. And unfortunately, the whole thing is held together with rivets, which, unlike something like a bolt or a screw, Rivets are not meant to come apart, so instead of just unscrewing something, I have to drill the rivet out. And the drill bit was not really working. It was kind of catching on the metal and trying to just rip the whole piece out of my hand. So I opted to switch the game plan and use a Dremel instead. Now that we have the rivets drilled out, we can just take apart this casing and actually get to the spring to see if we can fix it.
Okay, so I wasn't recording, but I glued on the plastic that had snapped off from the blinker switch, and hopefully that will allow the little spring to keep tension and not snap it again. I used some 5-minute epoxy, so it's gonna be really strong, and I kind of just covered the thing. I don't know if you can see this.
The piece of plastic that snapped in the blinker was actually still in there, so all I did was just layered on a bunch of glue to reinforce it and put it back where it was.
So hopefully that does the trick. The other side was also cracked and probably gonna snap off soon too, so I went ahead and glued that one anyways while it's still in place. And I'm gonna add a little bit more epoxy on the inside too, just to be safe. Because obviously the more surface area on anything glue, the better. And that should do the trick. I'm gonna let that cure for maybe half an hour just to be safe, and we'll come back. There we go. Alright, see this mass of glue? And over here, kind of hard to see. But basically, this is like some shitty plastic that they put this frankly pretty strong spring on, and so over the years the plastic cracks and then eventually it snaps if you put too much pressure on it, like say if you try to reset the turn signal while your wheel is like manually, like while you're still turning, which I did one time and then it snapped. So now instead of buying a whole new set, which you can't just buy this, you have to buy the whole housing, which is basically most of the steering wheel, except for the actual wheel itself, but everything behind it, which is like $300 or $400 to replace what is basically 5 cents worth of plastic. So I found the plastic piece that snapped off, and I just glued it back on, and I'm really hoping that that is able to solve my problem, because if not, this is gonna be like $400. So now, I'm working on just getting this little spring back over like that.
And boy oh boy was that a pain. It turns out that loaded springs are really hard to put in place. This was kind of a trial and error thing. I kind of just tried to force it on and then it would pop off, and then I would try and put it on a different way, and then it would kind of slip off again, and that happened a handful of times, but I just kept trying different ways of getting it on.
Oh, it's on! Oh man, I was really worried about that loaded spring. Okay, check it out. I did it! It's on! And see how it looks like it's supposed to now? Wow. I mean, there's a lot of glue on the side, but like, that's fine, right? Who cares? Sick. Alright, now I need to test it out, see if I can get this working again.
Now that we have the spring back inside, it's time to put the housing itself back together. That way we can test to see if that fix actually worked.
think it works now. Here, I'll show you. So, I had to, I didn't record this part. This housing was put together with rivets instead of like screws or bolts or anything. And I don't have a rivet gun, so I opted to put little dabs of glue around. And then if I ever need to open this again, if I ever need to open this again, which it's a piece that's meant to not be opened, which is why they use rivets. So if I do need to open this again, I will just cut the glue and glue it again. It's not a big deal. I'm gonna go ahead and start putting together the steering wheel now. Okay, and then steering wheel hits this piece right here, and it returns, and then down, up. Perfect. Nailed it. Awesome. Love it. Oh. Okay, so I just watched a video on how to put this back together because I've taken so much apart I already forgot. So I found the video that helped me take this apart originally and just kind of watched it backwards. This is done. I don't have to put anything else together. I just start reassembling this in the vehicle. So I'm gonna do that. And I have to keep the top on because the silicone on the window that I just repaired is still drying and I don't want to jack it up. So I'll see if there's an angle where I can put the camera, but this might not be able to be recorded. So hard to navigate in here. Okay, got some wire clippers and this little clip, and yeah, we're gonna put this here, and then that should be able to just clip right onto the little grounding connection piece, and we'll be good.
Remember that wire that we found when we were taking apart the steering wheel? That's what I'm fixing right now. It was the horn, as we figured out, so it's not necessarily crucial, I guess, but might as well fix it while we're in here, right? So all I'm doing is...
It's so hard to get in there. I wish I had a smaller lens.
Okay, rudely interrupted, but anyways, back to what I was saying. Here, all I'm doing is splicing the wire and attaching... Oh. This guy...
We're gonna do it the old-fashioned way.
So, as I was saying, all I'm doing here is reattaching the wire to a little clip that can go in the spot where the horn attaches to the electrical system. It's really not that complicated. You get the idea.
I just have to expose enough of the wire from the insulation so I can get it into this, and then we can crimp it down and it should be fine. Add a little tack of solder just to make sure this is really in there. Just gotta wait for it to heat up. I feel like a lot of working with mechanical things or electrical things or anything is, generally speaking, less about the skill required to do the thing and more about the knowledge of the thing existing. Like, if you didn't know what soldering was, this would be a real pain in the ass. But, since you know what soldering is, I could be like, okay, I just need to solder a connection here. And it might not be done super professionally, but it's done and it'll work. And it should hold. I mean, there's going to be a physical connection from the crimp and another physical connection from this. So, I don't know. Seems fine to me. Cool. Yeah, that looks great. And there we go. That's a new wire on there. It's a little tight, but I don't have any more wire laying around, so it's gonna have to work. I don't have any idea which way this goes. I don't know, we'll try one. That's not it. Boom! See, just pick one. Who cares? Alright, we can go ahead and get the other plastic pieces. I gotta wipe them down real quick. It's gonna have to work for now.